welcome to the MLSecOps Podcast. And for everybody joining, it is a pleasure to welcome Ron Del Rosario. He is the Chief Security Architect and AI ML Security Lead at SAP ISBN, which is a business unit of SAP. Ron, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining.
Thank you, Dee. Appreciate you inviting me to this forward-thinking podcast. Appreciate it.
Yeah, well, we're excited to have you. Hey, for our listeners and people who are reading the show notes, what is SAP ISBN? What is that particular business focused on?
Sure. So ISBN stands for Intelligent Spend and Business Networks. It's the famous products for under the ISBN portfolio includes SAP Ariba and SAP Concur. So SAP Ariba provides enterprise procurement, supply chain, and spend management solutions. And Concur offers enterprise expense, invoice, and travel solutions to large organizations around the world. So these are all software as a service.
Just some small multi-billion-dollar lines of business that, are used in a prevalent amount of Fortune 1000 enterprises and beyond. Yeah, those little things. That's
Yes.
really great. That's cool. So,
yes, these are SAP systems, correct.
SAP systems, awesome. So, I came across your LinkedIn profile. That's actually how we met. And the first thing that stood out to me was the Michelangelo picture. So if anybody's there, they should go click and become friends with Ron right now, if for no other reason than this Michelangelo picture is at the top. I'm curious, man, why that is an image? There's a lot of people that have a lot of things.
Yes.
What's the story behind that image?
So this is an awesome question. It's the first time it was asked to me. So I'm how should I say this? I think the best way to describe it is I'm a big fan of inventing stuff, right? Through writing, expressing your thoughts in writing, and even in my own art when I draw some stuff, right? So I'm a big fan of Da Vinci, of course, and the way he.
Oh, it's Da Vinci, not Michelangelo. This is my bad.
Yes, this is
Da Vinci.
all the art that you see there are his well-known drawings back in the past. The Vitruvian Man, the it looks like a helicopter, right, and the bridge and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So he back in the days, of course, there's no internet, there's no computer yet. This all exists in his head, right? He's super creative, and at the same time, he knows how to execute, right? And the way he executes is he starts thinking about stuff and then drawing them in details, and then he executes on stuff. That's always been my mantra. Like when I got started in information security, right? Then I think about problems, and I tend not to solve problems on how they were classically solved. In a way, I try to think of some creative ways on how to solve a specific problem. So it helps the company, it helps the enterprise, right?
Yeah. So with Da Vinci as your muse,
Yes.
I'm curious, how have you been thinking about this transition into the AI space, and in particular security of AI? If you had to both draw it out, write about it, talk about it, and then execute, how do you think about this domain?
I think for us security practitioners, so to speak, information security, computer security, software security, it's an opportunity. It's a giant opportunity for us to be creative on how we attack things, right? Specifically in the AI ML space, right? I think it's safe to say that you won't be able to find a security expert that's been doing 10 years plus in security. ML, right?
Yeah, I would take those odds in Vegas. I think you're right.
I would say I'm a big believer of like 10,000 hours of deliberate practice. For you to be considered an expert in your field, you need to put in like 10,000 hours of deliberate practice. Now, put that into perspective. We're product security folks, and our development teams are developing AI ML use cases, and we need to review this AI ML system from a security perspective. And guess what? We don't have that data scientist and machine learning background, right?
Yeah.
And it's up to us to be creative on how we attack this problem. And every day there's a new use case for developers to start adopting AI/ML in the products that we offer, right? So this is my take on how you. It's a perfect opportunity for us security folks to be creative, leveraging our
Yeah.
security mindset, at the same time learning to adapt on how we can learn AI/ML fast and learn how to secure it at a foundational level.
So on that basis, right? That transition from just traditional software security architecture, security practitioners, red team, blue team type of mentalities, as they move into AI, what's the biggest thing that is the same? And then I want you to tell me what your single biggest view is on what's different.
Okay. So I think foundationally, there's a lot of commonalities because with traditional information security, let's say we're protecting data, we're protecting assets, right? Data, as an example, right? And with the advent of AI/ML development, it's again we need to focus on data, the data set, right? When I say data set, and like ML systems traditionally, they need tons of data as part of their training process, right? So part of the learning journey for a security leader to learn how to secure AI/ML system is focusing on key aspects like data sets, right? Our developers, they will need access to massive data sets. It can be internally sourced or externally sourced, and we need to think about how we protect this massive data set so it doesn't influence how the machine learning model performs in production, right? So those are some of the things that I tend to focus on on a foundational level.
So when you talk about securing the data set, there's a lot of ways to think about that, right? There's everything from maintaining the version histories, maintaining
Absolutely.
lineage around that.
Absolutely.
There's things such as, making sure that
Who
the
was
data set
accessing
itself
it?
has been scrubbed. And then there's access controls. There's all these like
Absolutely.
traditional things. I guess one of the more interesting things in AI is that the AI models generally do memorize some of their training data sets, right? And if you're trying to secure the model or secure that model from giving up a lot of that data, are you guys focusing on that as well in terms of how that is being
So
applied?
I think what's happening in the enterprise nowadays is when development teams they have an existing use case for let's say integrating an ML model in an existing product or leveraging large language models to be specific. It's usually down. You can classify it into two buckets. One is it's in an internally developed machine learning model,
Yep.
meaning your development team is responsible from zero to pushing it into production. And the second most common use case, which is prevalent right now, is like we're just gonna consume a foundational model offered by a cloud service provider, right?
Right.
So like ChatGPT
I'm going to point
2.5.
to GPT or Azure GPT or AWS Bedrock or
Right. So this,
Gemini, whatever it is.
exactly. So two different same use case for leveraging ML model in their product, but two different ways to consume machine learning models, and they have like a separate risk profile, in my opinion. Right? All right. The first scenario, it will take more time from you as a product security, as an AI ML security lead, to guide your development teams in the entire life cycle of creating the machine learning model from scratch, right? Because you tend to focus. Okay, you need to try to understand the problem and how they plan to solve it with machine learning, and you try to understand their how they gather their data sets for training, right? Who has access to the training data set? Where is this training data set coming from? Is it
Sourced. Did I just pull it down from the open source world? Did I just bring it in?
internal trusted sources, meaning from our systems, our infrastructure? Is it? Do we have the correct proper permissions to use this if it's coming from customer
Right.
data versus
Controls.
versus a training data that's being pulled externally? This is high risk. I've seen some scenarios in the past with other companies where developers started using publicly available information either from GitHub or any well-known repo out there and use that to train their ML models, right?
Yeah.
With no vetting of some sort, right? So what happened is any user with malicious intent can modify that training data originating from a third-party source. It's coming into your system, and your developers just rely on the raw output of that processing, right? Without vetting. So that's high risk. So it's, and the second scenario, which is developers are simply using foundational models from cloud service providers. It has a lower risk, in my opinion, from a security perspective, because we have the benefit of a cloud service provider providing the initial layers of security on how to access that large language model, the training that they had to put in to make sure security and privacy considerations are considered, right? Think about Gemini, the new LLM for Google, right? So you as a developer, you have access to this built-in security characteristics of this LLM model, right? However, so what do I do if you're the lead AI ML security? You still need to understand how developers are maintaining their access and protecting their models in use through the cloud service provider. We talk about
Hey, I really want to dig in on this because I think you're making a really excellent point. We keep talking about the model.
Yep.
And in our worldview at Protect AI, the sponsors of the MLSecOps podcast, our view is pretty simplistic, which is the only real difference between an AI application or a class of software called AI and anything else is that it relies on or uses or touches or engages an ML model, a machine learning model at some point. How do you guys think about the security of that asset at SAP ISBN, which is that asset being the machine learning model?
Absolutely. So internally developed machine learning models. My opinion, this, by the way, some good inputs about that. I also like your take about we need to take into consideration provenance, right? We need to like an audit trail, right? End-to-end audit trail. How this ML model ended up in this state, like all the sources of data sets. But anyways, one of the approach that we're looking into is having an internal system that acts as a broker, manages it acts as a broker before a development team can access external large language models. So we have an internal system. That developers can make a request to, instead of making a direct request through the internet, through Hugging Face and any other well-known model repositories.
So basically, you are proxying that model as a gateway?
Exactly. So we had this secure proxy approach to ensure that all machine learning models are vetted from a security and privacy perspective before developers can use it.
Yeah, we have a product at Protect AI, which is exactly for that. Protect AI, the Guardian model proxy and model scanning tool, which can be used for internal repository management as well as external proxy. So it's cool to see you guys implementing that. But that gives you kind of the provenance and the lineage of that, which makes me wonder kind of how you think about any other asset in your ecosystem. Ron's team or anybody with the proper, authorities, rights, and permissions can scan an environment and say, oh, in SAP or SAP ISBN's ecosystem, here is Ron's PC. It contains this operating system. It contains these files, these applications, has these permissions. And if there's ever a mismatch between your stated policies or your stated postures, right, and what's happening on that device, in this case, an endpoint, you have the ability to kind of proactively address it. You can take it off the network, you can push update, you can force update, you can shut it down. You can even send a note to Ron's boss saying he didn't upgrade, he didn't do this, right? Like all the digital nanny tools that we have in the enterprise.
Yep.
a lot of that comes from that lineage and that provenance of a device or an endpoint or a piece of code, any other asset. But that doesn't exist for ML models. I mean, our company provides that, but do you guys have tools that are creating those types of things that allow you to create security postures on top of those assets, the models themselves or the data sets? How do you guys go about that?
Automated and centrally managed a solution. We don't have that capability yet, but that's something that we're actively addressing. And at the same time, this is the reason why last year I started an internal initiative called Secure AI ML Development Framework within
That's awesome.
which is an initiative that I'm leading inside SAP ISBN, and we're focusing on these aspects. Although we're trying to attack it manually, and this is where my lean security checklist came into play.
Yeah, we're gonna get there. We're gonna get there because I think that's fascinating. But I actually want, before we get there, I'd love to hear about the framework and educate the listeners and the readers and the viewers on what your framework consists of and how you think of that.
Right. So the framework is basically providing education and awareness across all product security teams within ISBN. It's what we're trying to do is surface the risk surface the known risk in AI/ML development, right, from a security and privacy perspective. I think you and I know this. The biggest problem right now is we have a lot of experienced cybersecurity professionals, but we don't have a lot of experienced cybersecurity professionals with foundational knowledge in data science and AI and ML techniques, right? So that's the number one problem. So the initiative, the number one.
So it's to basically educate them on, say, how the software development lifecycle of machine learning or AI application building is different than traditional web API development? Okay.
Absolutely. It's so part of the initiative was for me to conduct like an organizational-wide virtual training across all AppSec teams within ISBN. I gave them an overview of how AI/ML development, the AI/ML development lifecycle, and how ML is different from traditional software engineering. And then I gave them an overview of current industry security best practices, which includes OWASP Top 10, Atlas, MITRE Atlas Attack Framework, and even new documents from NIST about AI/ML taxonomy, known risk, right? So it's educational awareness. That's number one. Number two is the creation of a checklist, right? So it's to guide product security teams how to conduct efficient and effective security reviews of upcoming AI/ML features or products within ISBN. And the third one is a little bit of metrics, right? Benchmark, where we stand, right? So that's basically the three pillars of the Secure AI/ML initiative within SAP ISBN.
Awesome. And so against that backdrop, now that our listeners, readers, and viewers have that as context, let's talk about that lean security checklist approach against that framework. Walk us through kind of that checklist from your perspective, because it seems to me that once you focus on, hey, there's way more commonalities in the development pipeline than there are differences, but what you need to do is take, say, the same things you're doing for mitigating authentication bypasses or mitigating mismatches on access controls. The same things you're doing there, you need to be doing in the AI/ML space, but here's how it's different.
Absolutely.
So walk the audience through your lean security checklist and help us understand how it connects to those pillars of the Secure AI framework.
So absolutely. So the inspiration came from high assurance and mission critical task and operations, right? So in using checklists, as an example, before you can launch a rocket or space shuttle to space, right? The aviation industry and even some doctors, before they operate on a high profile patient, they use checklists of some sort, like operational readiness, right? So a checklist is a simple tool that can help us determine operational readiness. And in the context of AI ML development, it simplifies the complexity behind it so we can guide application security engineers or product security engineers to ask the right questions during a security review of an upcoming product or feature within their organization, right? So it's the cost to acquire cybersecurity, the cost to acquire talent with cybersecurity and AI ML background, or vice versa, and the amount of time to train an existing member of the team how to secure AML software during design and development, it's almost impossible, right?
Because you're trying to force them to take that leap to say, hey, get familiar with what we mean by feature engineering. And they're like, what?
Absolutely. So AppSec teams, they cannot be experts in AI ML in a matter of months, right? Same with developers and engineers. Same with AI ML developers and engineers, right? They cannot be expert in a matter of months in cybersecurity, right? So
well, look at the industry. Just look at the industry basics, right? How long have we had SCA tools and scanners and things? And
absolutely,
they'd say, "Hey, you're leaking an API key in this JSON file," but a data scientist, most data scientists, would be like, "What's a JSON file? I like tell me where it is in my Jupyter
absolutely,
notebook." Right. Absolutely. So context goes both ways, I would imagine.
Absolutely. So this is where a lean security checklist helps, right? So a lean security checklist, it focuses on the foundational aspects of secure AML development, right? Like what you mentioned, access control. Access control is super applicable to a lean security checklist because you, as an AppSec engineer interviewing the developer, who has access to your data sets, where are they stored, and how they are protected. And this can also include artifacts used to develop the machine learning model. When I say artifacts, this can be any file that has to do with your
goes back to your whole concept of full provenance of an AI system.
Exactly.
Right? Like the artifacts are different.
It can be a text file. It can be a code snippet. It can be a configuration file. When a threat actor gains unauthorized access to these artifacts, and threat actors are smart, right? They can easily, you guys have a PyTorch. This is a configuration for PyTorch or for TensorFlow. Oh, you guys are deploying on AWS SageMaker as an example, right? So those are the things that we need to protect. So ideally, the security leader or the AIML security lead drafts this checklist by collaborating with data scientists and AIML developers, either inside or outside of the organization, right? So, hey, I have this checklist from a security perspective. I want your take on it as a data scientist or ML developer. Does my question make sense to you, right? It has to apply on what you do on a daily basis. So, some guidance on how to create the security checklist. You need to draft it like the wording is expressed like how IETF drafted request for comments RFC's document, right?
Yeah.
You need to use the words shall and must, and then you support it by guiding questions for product security teams so they can solicit the correct information from the development teams so you can understand the security posture of the AIML project, right?
Yeah. And I imagine that this goes back to kind of the top, right? Which was, hey, if you have full provenance, if you have these checklists, if you have these bills of materials, if you have those things, you can kind of meet that must and shall type of language or type of framing that one would have, because at least you're starting with a baseline understanding that allows the two different practitioners from two different perspectives to kind of meet in the middle and standardize against those security postures that you're looking to implement, right?
Absolutely. And then,
so
go ahead.
I was going to say, along those lines, though, it's really fascinating because what you're talking about is really that ML system, that model system, and the pipeline, and all the components around that then feed into the entity of the AI application. And OWASP has separated their top 10 security components between AI applications, which is heavily generative AI focused, which I think is a mistake. My worldview, OWASP. And ML systems, which I actually think is very intuitive. It's very smart to say, hey, the machine learning model, no matter how it's given to you or how it's constructed, this is the security realm around that.
Okay.
Right? And they delineate these two things. OWASP, they're top 10, and you're a contributor to that. You know, that must have exposed you to some real eye-opening insights into these AI ML security risks. What were some of the threats or vulnerabilities that really kept you up as you were thinking through this in this top 10? Like, what was the thing that made you go, "Whoa, I need to be worried about that"?
So I think I kind of alluded into this earlier already. So it's so the common. I think one of the common mistakes or problems that we run into since we're in the early stages of machine learning security, AI ML development security is, so let's say I'm a developer, I'm working from home, I have my laptop with me, and I use it to develop and write pieces of code to support machine learning model development, ML model development for my company. And developers are not really super familiar with the fact that if you're saving your files, any kind of file, or what we call artifacts for ML model development, and you're saving it with no access control, no protection or any kind of encryption mechanisms, and you're storing them as plain text on your developer laptop, it's
Which happens all the time.
it's easy. It's easy to target. If let's say I'm a beginner developer, I'm not properly introduced to some known risk in AI ML development security. Of course, I'm just gonna keep it. I'm just gonna save it in an unencrypted folder in my laptop, and then I'm not gonna do anything to protect it, right? Because I lack the foundational education that I should be protecting these artifacts, right?
Right.
So what's gonna happen? Developer falls prey to a phishing attack. Developer laptop gets compromised by a threat actor, and guess what the threat actor stumbles into? Look, it's a folder of unencrypted files, and it has all the artifacts specific to an ML model development. So what I'm trying to say is, as a security leader for your organization, don't get overwhelmed by the new data science and AI ML jargons. Focus on the fundamentals. Focus on the fundamentals. As a matter of fact, one of my contributions to the OWASP Top 10 for LLM, my focus was on model registries, right?
Oh, hey man, do you know how many companies don't even have model registries? They just have models stored in S3 buckets or Azure Blob Storage.
What are you doing?
That thing.
Right? What are you doing? So don't get overwhelmed. Like, don't say like, oh, I don't have any AML data science background in my team. Well, you don't have to, right? Focus on the fundamentals. It's very important, right? So model registries. So my recommendation, always top 10 for LLM, is development teams should use access controlled model registries to keep track of their ML models in production, right?
That seems like a typical stumbling block in a lot of cases. Fair, unfair?
It's fair. It's fair assessment, in my opinion. So one of our responsibilities as security leaders, like what I alluded to earlier, we're here to surface the risk, right? So we're here to educate the teams that there are known risks in AI ML development lifecycle, and you don't have to. We don't need to purchase a commercial tool at the early stages. We need to focus on education and awareness, and then making sure we operationalize all the stuff that we learn, right?
And I think that's what's so cool about kind of how you guys are taking the lean security checklist approach for AI. It very much complements what we believe in from an MLSecOps perspective. Right?
Absolutely.
DevSecOps is a set of philosophies and principles, and you kind of just go through that pre-fried checklist. It's so refreshing to see.
Absolutely.
A company like SAP say we got to go do that.
And you know this as well, D. We start manual. We write things manually. We write reports manually. But we can easily semi-automate and automate this in the future once we start expressing our artifacts as JSON or metadata. Now we're giving...
Love it. Music to our ears. And for those who don't know, that's the Protect AI platform. So
absolutely.
We agree.
Any type of system now can easily parse and access your security checklist questionnaire data, even your ML model cards data, if you express them as JSON, now they can be easily parsed and you can easily integrate it in any of your IT security or application security risk management solutions, right? That's the vision behind all this. But of course, before we can run, we need to crawl and walk first, right? Manual.
Man, there's a lot of people that I just wish, if we're in our infancy of AI ML development, like we're doing tummy time. We're trying
Yes.
to like get over and
Absolutely.
strengthen our head, do some tummy time before we even think
Absolutely.
about crawling. So that's
Absolutely.
great.
Absolutely. So that was the vision behind it, and we're in the execution state on how we plan to semi-automate all our secure AI ML development initiative.
Well, that's really cool because I think the audience can take away, from a practicality perspective, start with the basics.
Absolutely.
Get an MLSecOps framework or your own lean security checklist approach, and if possible, we'll link to the show notes elsewhere where this is at. Stay on top. Don't fall prey to kind of the charlatanism of the industry. Focus on kind of what matters most, which is what you've been doing before. It's just applied into a new domain.
Absolutely.
So along those lines, as we begin to kind of exit the show here, you and I were talking prior to recording about Maslow's corporate hierarchy of needs: fear, greed, and regulation. And I'm curious, let's start with the fear one. As you think about security of AI, what is one of maybe the biggest fears you have that could be near term?
Like AI as a system holistically?
AI is a system that you need to guard against, right? So the biggest fear of an AI breach for you at SAP or something, at SAP ISBN in particular, what would be different about an AI security breach versus typical security incident?
Can you give me an example?
That's what I'm trying to ask you for, because we have lots, right? We can think about when you deploy an AI in a system, whether it's generative or non, we have a lot of thoughts around what we think those differences are of an AI-oriented breach and how versus traditional software. And I'll give you a simple example. Today, if there's a data exfiltration on a non-AI system, we have a lot of good forensic tools to kind of trace that back and figure out where or how that happened, right? Mm-hmm. But in an AI development environment, in an AI system, and how the fragmentation of those data models are dispersed all over the place and those data assets, and you don't know who touched it, you don't know what happened, you don't know what brought in, you don't know like what data was guaranteed to be used in the train versus tune, splits, if you will. There's not all that automation and control. So if there's a data leakage due to the AI environment, your incident response on that is grossly impacted. Like it's a much bigger blast radius in our worldview. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I think with your example, my biggest threat is trying to map out the attack surface. That's the biggest threat for me, because if I need to have visibility to the entire life cycle on how this machine learning AI system was either developed or consumed from a third party, and how it was integrated to our existing system. Going back to your example, I don't know where to start. The attack surface is too big. Especially if it's originating from a third party source, the AI system, where I need to interrogate the provider of the AI system if it's offered as a software as a service.
We wrote an article about this. We'll put it in the show notes, which is this notion of kind of thinking about a traditional, Lockheed Martin-esque cyber kill chain, and how an AI ML bill of materials and the automation control of that really kind of bridges the gaps, if you will, between being able to see and understand and map the attack surface of an AI ecosystem, of an AI environment, and have full provenance of that model.
Absolutely.
How it's different, how an AI kill chain is very different than a traditional kill chain. So, that actually seems like it's both the biggest concern, meaning I don't have visibility into that, and the biggest opportunity that when I'm given that, I can then bring in my lean security checklist, apply it against that, and make sure at a minimum that I have the postures matched, I would assume, right?
Yep, 100%. So that's something.
Cool.
that's something that we can easily consider and incorporate in our security checklist. When we're deploying third-party AI systems, we need to understand the following, right? So how
Yeah.
it integrates to the network, how it communicates inside and outside of the network, and all those stuff. So we can identify like potential attack surfaces. And I'm a big proponent of threat modeling, of course. Any integration with a third-party solution, regardless if it's an AI or AI system or not, we do a full threat modeling approach, right? So
That's great.
we can potentially identify potential threats and attack vectors on the system.
That's awesome. So, let's leave our audience with one future thing. What's a future prediction for you? I always ask people, every time people talk about LLMs, I'm like, that's
Yeah.
2023. I think 2024 and beyond is multimodal models, large multimodal models. Like, as an example, what's the thing that you're focusing on most in the realm of AI and how it impacts security, particularly as you look out with your responsibilities, massive responsibilities in over the next 12 to 18 months? How do you think about that, Ron?
That's an excellent question. What I'm looking into is I'm really super interested on how generative adversarial networks or GANs will evolve and play out. Right? I think maybe 5 to 10 years, it's going to be an AI system protecting an infrastructure against another AI system, right? That's how generative adversarial network works. So I think, to simplify it, the concept behind GANs, it revolves around a generator and a discriminator, right? The generator can be offensive, generates potential attacks against another system, and the discriminator tries to figure out, is this an attack? Is this or it's just a common traffic or some sort, right?
Yep.
I'm super curious, and there's tons of research already conducted on potential of using generative adversarial networks for cybersecurity. I think it's a worthy investment of time for us cybersecurity professionals to monitor the progress on advancement in GANs.
So speaking of worthy investment of time, this was a wonderfully worthy investment of time. Thank you so much, Ron. I appreciate that for
Same
coming
here,
on the
dude.
podcast, educating our market and team. And for anybody who wants to see some really cool Da Vinci material, go check out Ron's LinkedIn profile. And thanks for tuning in. Ron, thanks for coming on. We really appreciate having you on.
Thank you, D. This was awesome, as expected. I love talking about what can happen in the future based on existing trends, and AI ML is here to stay. We need to keep up to speed as cybersecurity professionals.
Thanks so much, Ron. And thank you to the audience as well. We'll put all the links in the show notes. See you next time.